Hey, everybody, I'm John Halpin. Welcome to the Tuesday, August 25th edition of the Fox Sports Fantasy 15 podcast and Google Hangout. I'm here with Nick Goss from NESN.com. Since Nick's in New England in Patriots territory, let's talk about Reggie Wayne. What I want to say is, do we need to talk about Reggie Wayne from a fantasy standpoint? I'm thinking pretty much no.
I would agree with that, but when you look at the Patriots receivers right now, Julian Edelman hasn't played in the preseason, although we think he's going to be ready for week one. But Brandon Gibson has been banged up a bit. Brandon LaFell's been on the PUP list. Aaron Dobson has been hurt, and he's been hurt quite a bit in his career. So if the injuries create a situation where Reggie Wayne is going to see the field, I think he has some value late in your draft. I think in the last few rounds of your draft, you could do a lot worse. But right now, until we see what the injury situation is, I really don't think he has much fantasy value.
I've got Reggie Wayne. I think I plugged him in at 72nd on the wide receiver ranking, so I'm not really excited. The Boston Herald actually saw a note today that said it's hard to see him playing anything more than a secondary role. And to your point, hard to see. It could happen, but the other one I wanted to ask about, you mentioned Aaron Dobson. Is that ever going to happen with that guy, or is Belichick just kind of so sick of the injuries and everything else? Like, I mean, I know it's only a season plus, but that doesn't seem like it's going to work out there.
I really don't. I mean, not only has he been banged up with injuries, as you mentioned, but when he's on the field, he hasn't been too productive. There are other receivers that are really impressed in camp, and Brandon Gibson, before he got banged up, was doing pretty well. Chris Harper did very well against New Orleans Saints in their second preseason game. I think the Patriots have enough receiving options. They have multiple tight ends, like Gronkowski, Chandler, and some other guys they have. I just don't see him, seeing the field. And I think he's way down the depth chart. Even if he can stay healthy, I just don't think the Patriots really have a spot for him, especially in a fantasy relevant role. I really don't see any value at all.
All right, everybody. Before we move on to the other topics, if you like this podcast, and we hope you do, please subscribe on both iTunes and SoundCloud to the Fantasy 15. Also, Twitter. Nick's on Twitter at Nick Goss NESN, right? NESN. I'm at JHalpin37. I'm sure Nick would be happy to answer any questions you might have about fantasy football, and I certainly would too. Let's move on to other things in the news for fantasy football owners. Some drafts we are about into big draft week. We are in the middle of the two big draft weekends, I would think. There was a report Monday that Arian Foster, and I actually listened to it. John McClain from the Houston Chronicle was on the Football Die Hard show on SiriusXM Fantasy. And I listened to the clip this morning, and he talked about Arian Foster returning early. And he said, all right, he's probably not going to go on the injured reserve designated to return. So it won't require him to miss 8 games. He said, I think he can miss 4, maybe 5 or 6, but not 8. This seems like a more optimistic viewpoint than we've heard on Foster so far. Some people were that optimistic. The Texans haven't said much, but it sounds like the news is getting better on Foster. Does news like this change your opinion of him, or is that still too much of a moving target for you?
It's still too much of a moving target. I mean, he's missed some games in the past, and this injury certainly is something that would be a concern for me. I think we'll probably have more clarity on his situation as we get into the first week of September, when a lot of drafts are going to happen. But for me, I think he's a running back too right now. I would take him probably the 4th, 5th, or 6th round. I would make sure I have enough depth at running back when he comes back, because I wouldn't want to rely on him when he comes back. If he does return and he's healthy, you can use some of that running back depth that you have, to trade for a position of weakness on your team. I don't like the quarterback situation there, so he's going to get a lot of touches, and I'm wondering if the defense is going to be able to stack the box against the Texans and really key on him a lot, because I mean, let's face it, no one's scared of Ryan Mallett or Brian Hoyer beating them. But when he comes back, I think he can be productive. I mean, he's very involved in the passing game. He's a goal line threat. But I say 4th, 5th, 6th round is where I would go, depending on if the injury prognosis continues to improve.
All right, so right now I'm checking. I use right now Fantasy Football Calculator for average draft position. Foster is 6th round, 4th pick. So it sounds like you're in at that point.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
All right, I actually got him in the 7th round of a draft a couple of weeks ago, the day after the surgery, and I crossed my fingers. So I'm pretty happy right now about that. But enough about me. All right. Next up, the Jordy Nelson injury. Huge blow to people who drafted already if they picked him. Not a huge blow if you drafted Davante Adams. But Davante Adams seems to be like Randall Cobb was going to get his already. I mean, maybe you bump Cobb up a slot or two in your rankings, but Adams is the guy who's the big mover. How high do you move Davante Adams on the wide receiver list?
I think he's top 15. I mean, he's a pretty versatile guy. He can play in the slot, play outside. Obviously Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. I think he's definitely a top 15 receiver for sure.
All right, I'm going to ask you some either or on Davante Adams, since you said top 15. Top 15 is a little, I will say top 15 is a little aggressive compared to what I've heard, and that's great. I mean, that's a great passing offense to like.
I didn't have him in my top 20 when I did my rankings. I think it was August 3rd or 4th. If I had redid them, he would for sure be in the top 20, and I would strongly consider putting him in my top 15.
All right, so would you rather have Davante Adams or Amari Cooper?
Davante Adams.
Adams or Jordan Matthews?
Davante Adams.
Whoa. Adams or Brandon Cooks?
Brandon Cooks for sure.
Okay. But yeah, top 15, that's because I think I moved in Adams I've got him in at 20. I've actually got him behind Sammy Watkins, and I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking to myself now, I've got him behind Watkins. Do I want the guy getting the second target for Aaron Rodgers or the first target for Tyrod Taylor, Matt Castle, EJ Manuel? So I might have to rethink that one ranking right there. Any of the other receivers do anything for you? Richard Rodgers at tight end, they seem to like him a little bit. The other receivers, I mean, it could be Ty Montgomery, it could be Jeff Janis. Anybody any of those more than the others worth a late round flyer for you?
Jeff Janis, if he improves enough and impresses enough in the preseason here to be the number 3 guy, I think he could have some value as a late round flyer in deep drafts. I do like Richard Rodgers if he does win that starting tight end job. Big, physical, athletic tight end who can be a target in the red zone. So I think those 2 guys I would target late. But I'm not chomping at the bit to get in either one of them.
All right. Finally, Aaron Rodgers. Where did you have him ranked before the injury, and does his ranking change for you?
I had him in the top 3, and I don't see really any reason to change that. I mean, he's a guy, much like Tom Brady, who can be fantasy relevant, a top 3 quarterback without an elite core of receivers. I mean, he still has quite a few guys who can do a lot of damage. I mean, we mentioned Randall Cobb, Davante Adams, Richard Rodgers. Eddie Lacy in the backfield is going to keep defenses honest. So I think Rodgers, for me, is still a top 3 fantasy quarterback, even with this injury.
All right. Next up, Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley has been cleared to practice. Jeff Fisher said, though, he's going to wear the yellow hat, not the red jersey in St. Louis, the yellow hat, which means he can't be touched in practice. They asked Fisher on Monday, does this mean he'll be ready for the season opener? Fisher said, well, we don't know yet. Where are you drafting Todd Gurley right now? This news is probably nothing new to anybody. It's nice to hear that he's cleared for practice. But where's Todd Gurley in your running back rankings?
He's definitely top 20, 25, 20 to 25 range. If I'm drafting him in a non-keeper league, I would probably target 6th or 7th round. But if I'm targeting him in a keeper league, I think he's someone who has a ton of talent, a pretty good long-term value. I would maybe late 3rd, 4th round, in that situation. But, I think he's a guy who I wouldn't expect much of him early in the season. If you're depending on him to be running back 1 or 2 the first maybe 5 or 6 weeks, I think that's a bit optimistic. But I think in the second half of the season into the fantasy playoffs, he could have some pretty good value. Unless the Rams are totally out of it and they're looking at getting a high draft pick and they're like, you know what, why don't we just save him for next season? We don't want to damage his long-term value of the player we spent a 10th overall pick on. So if he comes back and he's healthy, I think he can be pretty productive. But I'm waiting till the 6th, 7th round, if I'm not a non-keeper league, to take him.
So right now I'm looking at ADPs again. Gurley, first pick of the 5th. Sounds like you're out.
In a non-keeper league, yeah.
Yep. Okay. The other guy there, Tre Mason. So depending on how you look at Gurley, the way you look at Gurley affects how you look at Tre Mason. Is Tre Mason a guy who down in the, let's say, 8th round appeals to you, or would you rather avoid a guy who could lose his job by week 3 or 4?
I would. That is a red flag for me. Now, Tre Mason, I just really don't think much highly of him anyway. But if you have someone who's going to lose their job by week 8 or 10, that definitely is a red flag. I would stay away from him, not only because I don't think he'd be too fantasy relevant as the starter, but if he's going to get limited roles if Gurley comes back, that's definitely a no for me.
Okay. Finally, we're going to go into some players who seem to be, let's say, trendy. I've got one at all the 4 positions, and I want to see what you think of them. First, and it doesn't mean I don't like them. When I say trendy, it's not a knock. It means it's these people who you might like, but everybody likes them. And Amir Abdullah is off this list because he's so far off the charts on trendiness, I'm not even going to talk about him anymore. Teddy Bridgewater. I've got Teddy Bridgewater at QB 17. I like him. I think there's a lot of mouths to feed in Minnesota, most notably being the guy behind him who he's going to hand the ball to a lot. What do you think of Teddy Bridgewater?
I'm really high on Teddy Bridgewater. I'm all aboard the hype train there. He was great last year. Now he has Mike Wallace, who obviously disappointment in Miami, but he can stretch the field with his big playability. We know Cordarrelle Patterson could be a game changer on any play. If Kyle Rudolph is healthy, I like that addition as well. And, the offensive line improved. And as you said, Adrian Peterson is back there. So defense will have to respect that. I think he has a chance to be a top 15 quarterback this season. 17, I like that ranking. I think that's a pretty good spot for him. In a 2-quarterback league, I would absolutely take him. If you're in a 1-quarterback league per week, I would take him as a backup, but I wouldn't start him. But I think very highly of Bridgewater, and I think definitely a player you should target in a 2-quarterback league because I think there's a lot of room for growth there.
You see, I think I like him better as a real quarterback than a fantasy quarterback for this year. Quick question for you. Here's a guy I feel like I like more. Most people would answer one way, but I think I'm answering the other. Bridgewater or Jameis Winston?
Bridgewater.
Okay, yeah, I like Winston. I'm sold on the targets that Winston has, and the fact that I don't think his team is going to run that much, and I think they're going to be losing a lot. But yeah, Bridgewater. I mean, again, I really like him, and I think everybody had the hype is justified on him. Next up, speaking to the Bucs, Doug Martin had another nice night. Had a really great run last night. He looked like he was trapped on the sideline, ran for 25 yards or something like that. But there's been a lot of chatter from Bucs camp about how Martin looks great. He's improved from last year. You coming in the offseason, he's one of those guys you kind of went, yeah, I don't know, Doug Martin, I'm not getting sucked in on that again. Is he at the point where he's starting to suck you in?
He is. I think he definitely has some bounce back potential. I mean, especially if he wins a starting job in an offense, I think could be pretty good. I mean, Jameis Winston definitely has a good core of receivers there. He does look slimmer. He looks more athletic. Ability to hit the hole faster this preseason than maybe in the past. It's going to be tough for fantasy owners to take him, though. I mean, a lot of people have, after his great rookie season last 2 years, he's really disappointed to the point where I think people were like, I don't want to get sucked into that again. But I think he is one of the players that has the biggest bounce back potential. We know he has a ton of talent, and in an offense that's pretty good and should be pretty balanced. I would draft him as an RB3. I think he has the potential to be an RB2 by the season's end. So, I like him a lot, and I would take him probably 9th, 10th, or 11th round.
ADP right now, top of the 5th. It's too rich for your blood, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think it's a little rich for me too. I like Martin. I actually liked him coming in last year. Again, I was ready to go back in. And I don't think this preseason is going to get me from him. Wide receiver John Brown from the Cardinals had a couple of nice catches in the game over the weekend. If Michael Floyd's healthy, see, I'm looking at John Brown and I go, all right, I like the guy, but people are drafting him a little high, and I should probably have that in front of me. Hold on one second. John Brown, middle of the 7th round ADP right now. And I'm looking, I say, well, I know Fitz is getting old. I like Michael Floyd as long as his hand heals. John Brown, I feel like I liked him as sort of a late sleeper type. I feel like if people are drafting him as a wide receiver 3, I don't know if I want to buy in at that price. What about you?
I think he could be a decent wide receiver 3. Obviously, if Floyd's healthy by week 1, and I would expect he probably will be, I wouldn't be a top 12 round pick for me. But in deep leagues where you have 12 and 16 teams, I think he's definitely worth a flyer. As you mentioned, Larry Fitzgerald is getting older. If Carson Palmer, I mean, if he can be healthy, I think he'll spread the ball around. I think John Brown can get enough touches to be relevant in deep leagues. But if I'm in a 10-team league and I have plenty of depth at receiver, I'm not looking to take John Brown. I would just monitor Floyd's injury situation, but I'm really not that high on him.
And Floyd, by the way, he's a guy. I know he wasn't good last year. He is the 51st receiver off the board right now. I really like that price for a guy that talented. If my late round strategy is throwing darts, then I think that's a nice dart to throw. Last one up, tight end Tyler Eifert. Looks good. Job all to himself. Probably would have been good last year if he didn't get hurt in that first game. He is going off the board. Let's see. I've got him ranked 11th among the tight ends. ADP-wise, he is going off. Let's see. He is the 11th tight end there. 10th round. If you wait on your tight ends and don't get one of the elites, is Tyler Eifert a guy you're looking at targeting?
Definitely. I think he could be a top 12, 15 tight end if he stays healthy for the entire season. I think Andy Dalton is someone who would prefer to throw to tight ends and not take too many mistakes, check down routes, 10 to 15 yard routes. And I look at Tyler Eifert, he's a big, strong, athletic guy, a red zone target if healthy. I'm pretty high on him. And as long as he's able to stay on the field, I think he can definitely be a very useful tight end.
All right, Nick, we're going to wrap it up here. What other fantasy coverage should people look for at NESN.com?
We launched our fantasy draft kit a few weeks ago, and on that page we have links to all our rankings, as well as tips for how to go in your do's and don'ts in your fantasy draft, as well as our top sleepers and players to avoid.
All right. Thanks a lot. Now, you do Bruins too. Did I read that right?
Yes, Bruins beat writer. Coming up here in a few weeks, so getting excited for that. But I play in 3 or 4 fantasy leagues, so always have an eye on football as well.
All right. We might check back with you if we can ever get into – anyone ever wanting fantasy hockey talk, we'll get Nick back on the podcast, definitely. All right, everybody. Nick, thanks a lot for doing this. I really appreciate it, and we look forward to doing it again soon, okay?
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Please, again, subscribe here on to the Fantasy 15 if you're listening on iTunes or SoundCloud. Also, if you want to play fantasy football, if you want to join a league, start a league, check out rankings, lots of draft preview stuff, plenty to help you at foxsports.com/fantasy/football. We're going to be back with another podcast on Friday. Please come on back and listen then. Then for Nick Goss, I'm John Halpin. Thank you for listening to the Fox Fantasy 15.